You arrive at your rental, punch in the door code, and step into a space you've only seen in photos. You drop your bags and turn the lock. Instantly, the unfamiliar walls feel like a sanctuary. We seek out these getaways to lose ourselves, whether it's in the massive, sensory-heavy crowds of Coachella, the packed boardwalks of a beach town, or the silence of a desert retreat. But that sense of freedom comes with a hidden cost. You don't know which floorboards usually creak, you don't know the local neighborhood dynamics, and you aren't aware of the blind spots in the landscape just past the porch light. When you combine the relaxed guard of a vacation with a floor plan you don't fully understand, you create a scenario where a threat can move entirely unmonitored. The process often begins in the open. Predators use the anonymity of a crowd as a mask, closing the physical gap between themselves and a target while everyone else is looking at the stage. During a trip to Coachella, one woman noticed an older, scruffy man in black boots who seemed out of place among the colorful festival-goers. She moved between different stages and food stands, yet every time she looked toward the edge of the crowd, he was there, watching from the periphery. In San Diego, another victim spent her afternoon taking sunset photos for Instagram. It wasn't until later she scrolled through the images and saw a man in a black hood lingering in the background of almost every single shot, his eyes fixed directly on the camera. It's easier to blame the festival drugs, the heat, or a sudden spike in social anxiety than to admit you are being hunted. We often talk ourselves out of our own survival instincts because we don't want to make a scene in front of our friends. The stalker relies on this hesitation. They watch to see if you will ignore your gut, confirming that they can continue to close the distance without being challenged. As the sun goes down, the observation shifts from the public square to the property line. The stranger from the crowd follows the car back to the rental, moving into the shadows just outside the door. At a remote house in Palm Springs, a couple was woken up at 1 a.m. by faint thumps against the exterior walls. They lay in bed, listening, but ultimately told themselves it was just the desert wind or a stray animal. Outside, the reality was much more deliberate. Backyard motion lights began to trigger in a sequential path. One after another, the lights traced a figure moving from the back fence, past the pool, toward the kitchen door. In the San Diego house, the victim woke up from a nap and looked toward the lower-level window. Standing right against the glass was the very same hooded man from the beach photos, waving at her. This is how a predator maps a house. They are finding the side stairs, checking which gates are left unlocked, and seeing exactly how the occupants react to a bump in the night. The distance has now vanished. The person who was once a face in a crowd of thousands is now a silhouette standing inches away from the bedroom glass. Eventually, the perimeter is crossed. The locks that felt so secure when checking in are bypassed, and the intruder enters the home. In San Diego, the victim heard the front door open and threw herself against her bedroom door to barricade it. A second later, the intruder was on the other side, violently jerking the handle and throwing his weight against the wood. In Palm Springs, the husband investigated a storage shed next to the pool. When he reached the door, he heard a calm, steady voice from inside the darkness say, "Excuse me, could you open the door, please?" followed by a quiet, mocking laugh. The most terrifying breach happened at the Coachella rental. The victim woke up from a dead sleep to see a tall, broad figure standing completely still in her bedroom doorway. It was the same scruffy man she had seen at the festival, now staring at her from inside her own room. This is the reality of the vacation rental in a crisis. You have no weapons, no neighbors who recognize your voice, and no familiar exits to run toward in the dark. You realize that the sanctuary you paid for was an illusion. You are trapped in a house you don't know, with a person who has been tracking you for days. When the sun comes up, your brain desperately tries to rationalize the experience. You want to believe it was a nightmare, or a bad reaction to the stress of travel, but then you see the marks on the floor. At the Coachella house, the girls found muddy boot prints that started at the front door and walked all the way down the hall. They stopped exactly at the bedroom doorway where the man had been standing, then turned around to head back out. In San Diego, the police discovered that the intruder hadn't just broken in. He had stolen the women's bathing suits and planted a hidden camera in the corner of the bedroom to continue watching them after he left. And in Palm Springs, as the couple packed their car to flee, An officer found a dirty baseball cap shoved behind the living room couch. It didn't belong to the guests, proving the man had been sitting inside the house while they slept. This physical evidence is what truly breaks you. It ends the possibility that you were just being paranoid and forces you to see exactly how close you came to never leaving that house. These stories highlight the specific vulnerabilities of short-term rentals: door codes that are rarely changed, side gates left unlatched, and hosts who don't respond to emergency messages until it's too late. The trauma doesn't end when the trip is over. These victims live with long-term hypervigilance, swearing off festivals and compulsively checking the doorway of every room they enter for years afterward. The boundary between the public world and your private safe space is much thinner than it feels, especially when you are sleeping in a home that isn't yours. The next time you feel a pair of eyes on you in a crowd, or hear a strange thump against the siding of a rental house, listen. Don't tell yourself you're being dramatic. Your instincts are often the only things standing between you and the person on the other side of the glass.